I get broads in Atlanta, but you the bitches, super fine. Credit cards in the sky, wake up sex. Let the sound go with your leg. Did the express out of the plan? I can change this up with the plan. I can change this up with the daddy, but get that track, legacies. Follow, ways to get in the trouble. Pop a bird, I got style like a river, they come get you. I get broads in Atlanta, but you the bitches, super fine. Credit cards in the sky, wake up sex. Let the sound go with your leg. Did the express out of the plan? I can change this up with the plan. I can change this up with the daddy, but get that track, legacies. Follow, ways to get in the trouble. Pop a bird, I got style like a river, they come get you. I get broads in Atlanta, but you the bitches, super fine. Credit cards in the sky, wake up sex. Let the sound go with your leg. Did the express out of the plan? I can change this up with the plan. I can change this up with the daddy, but get that track, legacies. Follow, ways to get.
All right, welcome to the San Diego Tijuana Revolutionary Poets Brigade. This is our announcement, this is our declaration, this is our proclamation. The poets encourage everyone to get out and vote. We understand that sometimes voting and the way that the system works, you might think that's the problem, but it is also the only way that we can affect and solve the problem. Rephrase that. It is one of the many ways that we can affect the solutions, we can cause change. So that's what this entire evening is about. It is about poets using our voice, using our words, using the one thing that we need to tell people to get out and make a change, and that is the pen. We are in San Diego, California right now at the legendary Queen Bee's Arts and Culture Center, and we know where we are. We have seen people use their voice, use their words. We have folks putting out bills that are affecting the entire state, that are affecting the entire country, and it really starts because the folks in the community are the ones that are out here saying it's time to make a change. And we are fortunate in this community that the poets oftentimes lead these voices, that the poets hear what's happening and they go out and rephrase and they paraphrase and they put it to pen, they put it to metaphor, and they are out here letting people know what is really going on in these streets, what is really going on in these classes, what is really going on in these hospitals, what is really going on behind bars and lockup. And because of these voices, we turn it into art, and that art hears a numerous amount of voices. Eventually it gets to our House of Representatives, it gets to Congress, it gets to the entire nation, and that's what this is about. This is about affecting the system. This is about affecting change. We got my man DJ show2 on the ones and twos.
Yes. Thank you.
And poetry is the tool, is the art that really infuses the entire voice. That's a dope concept of why poetry. And that's a dope reminder of why the San Diego Tijuana Poets Brigade, why we do this, why we come together. This is just the first of many voter registration events that's going to be happening. If you are not registered to vote, it is not that difficult to do. A simple Google search on how do I get registered to vote, where do I go, will help find the way. Contact your local, I teach at a community college. You could walk into a community college and have the first question be, how do I get registered to vote? That will lead you to where you need to be. Any public office is happy to help you get registered, and that's how we make a change. Next up to the mic is one of San Diego's finest. This man has been putting it down for poetry for years and years and years, and always sets the standard. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, make some noise for Ted Washington. Give it up, give it up, give it up.
I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for having me. People died so we have the right to vote. People continue to die so we have the right to vote. And they are making laws constantly so that the right to vote is harder and harder to use. This is a quick, I'm just going to read 3 poems. First one is really short, called Price Tag. I'm afraid I'm going to blow up on this mic. Should I set the mic aside. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me?
Do it on the mic because you're recording.
All right, I'll do it on the mic. Rich people want their country back. That dream was written by them, for them. It was not meant to empower, but to enslave, or at least justify the right to do so, and fortify positions held by those holding the land. Not our land, their land. Rich people want their country back. And if buying the government is what it takes, how much does it cost? When I knew I was doing this event, I wanted to write something fresh and new, and this is like, I printed this this morning. I mean, like, we just finished writing this, so this is something just for this event, something new. The reason why you have to vote is because the problems that we have in this world are bigger than just our own country. And we got to put ourselves in position to, well, if you want your children and your grandchildren to live, here you go. 1968. What a year. With so much to remember, some things are bound to slip through the cracks of memory, left off the pages of history books. MLK and RFK shot, dead, killed, assassinated. North Korea seizes the Pueblo. North Vietnam launches an offensive in celebration of a Lunar New Year. Boeing's 747 launches the term jumbo jet. Tommy Smith and John Carlos raise their fists and make the Olympics must-see TV, dragging America's racial injustices before the world. Kirk kisses Uhura, and TV again goes where no nation has gone before, but now has, as Apollo 8 circles the moon. But this is not a poem about politics of 1968 or the people that died in 1968. It's about a birth. Christy is her name, a little placation for a torn nation and money for the bank account. Because if anything will traverse racism, it's capitalism. So a black Barbie was released in 1968. Not really a Barbie, because Christy gets her own face mold and color. Christy was made to be Barbie's black friend. Every cool white girl has at least one black friend. And at this point in time, it's required to have at least one black friend to not be a racist. So in 1968, Christy. But this is not a poem about Christy. This is a poem about Brad. If you have Barbie, Ken, and Christy, what the fuck happens with that combo? Interracial threesomes? So in 1970, Brad was born. Brad gets his own face mold, but gets Christy's color. You can only do so much to spur imagination, and Brad never sold well. Black men have never been embraced by this nation, and Brad was no different. Consequently, when a session of make-believe in sandbox dunes ended in a thunderstorm-driven hasty retreat, a Brad was lost. Years passed, and the park was rezoned, and a backhoe unearthed Brad. But this is not a Toy Story poem about reunion. In fact, when Brad was wrested from the pit, an arm was lost. The refuse was sifted from the soil, and Brad was rescued by an artist that prized the artifact for repurposing in a counterculture collage. The right arm, nestled amongst water bottles and shopping bags, was sent to be recycled. Bundled, wrapped, strapped, and placed on a barge, the arm was bound for its place of origin, China. A winter squall's waves tore at the lashings, and loosened bits and pieces were cast adrift at sea. So this is not even a poem about all of Brad. This is a poem about Brad's right arm, now resting in the South Pacific on the beach of Henderson Island, entangled in some fishing net, leaning against a shampoo bottle and shaded by the shadow of a Barbie lunchbox. Scoured by the salt water, pockmarked by the sand, and bleached by the sun, the Christy color is a faded memory. It could be Ken's arm, but it's Brad's arm. Exiled, accompanied by the sounds of surf and seagulls, where it will spend the next 1,000 years wasting away. And I'm going to close with this poem. Many people think it's a very negative poem, but it's actually a poem of positivity, actually. This poem looks forward. Here we go. It's called Pax Romana. I don't know if anybody knows what Pax Romana is. Pax Romana is what we labeled as a 200-year period of peace that they had in Rome. Although that period of peace was for the interior of Rome, because on the outskirts of the Roman Empire, there was always war. So here we go. We want to be Roman. Establish an empire that lasts 1,500 years. America is 243 years old, and like Rome, has rarely known peace. Has forces roaming the earth, waging war to spread our culture and way of life. And above all, to bring tithes to Caesar, us. To stand outside of our sphere of influence is to be at war with Caesar, us. Also, like the Romans, we will have to survive wicked leadership. This is not the first bad president. And if the empire is to last another 1,257 years, this will not be the last. We will survive our Caligula. His name will not grace eternity. Nothing constructed by humans will. Gravity cannot be denied. Walls fall. The gods of today will be the mythology of tomorrow. The deeds of great people will become fables told to children. And conversely, the actions of despots are to be tales told to terrorize. But we are here today and live in a time of despots. So gird yourselves for a long fight. Fighting is your birthright as a citizen of the empire. Fighting for domination abroad. Fighting for domination at home. Fighting, fighting, fighting. Always fighting. Pax Romana? Not yet. Go out and vote, people. That's the only way you're going to fight. That's the only way to do it.
So that was Ted Washington, man. This man's been putting in work for a long time in this city and making sure that people are informed, making sure people are engaged, and most importantly, making sure that poets have a place to print, have a way to get their words out, both on stage and through Puna Press, so we're excited about that. Next up, we're gonna have a speaker come to the stage and give us some insight into what's happening on the U.S. and border immigration policies, why it's important for us to get our voice out, especially us coming in San Diego. This is the border town, border region, some might even call it El Norte. And so we want to give a warm round of applause to Mr. Pedro Reyes, who is the director of the American Friends Service Committee, United States and Mexico Border Program. Mr. Rios has been putting in work for over 20 years, has been active all the way back. So let's look forward to hearing what he's got to say. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pedro Reyes.
Thank you. All right, thank you. I really like that line, walls fall. It resonates with the vision, I think, that we bring forward when we're constantly working and discovering that there are people out there that want to build not one wall, not two walls, but 3 walls and even more if they could. And we know that right now there are walls that are being constructed that are 30 feet high. And I'll tell you something, the 30-foot wall was done with a purpose. When we met with the local Border Patrol sector chief, he told us that the reason why it was built at 30 feet high was because they did an analysis, a psychological analysis to determine at what height a normal human being would become disoriented when they're climbing a wall, should they intend to cross to the other side, to the US from Mexico. And they determined that 30 feet high was high enough to disorient the individual where that person would not continue to try to climb the border wall. And so there's a method to the madness of why walls are the height that we see them today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about immigration and border issues and try to bring it back to why it's important to vote and to register to vote, and it's not too early to register, but it can be too late. So we have some tables here, and folks that are here, if you have not yet registered to vote, please do. And so I'm going to take us back a little bit in time. But before that, I want to just remind us of some of the current atrocities that we're seeing here today. And so some of the things that we've heard about and we've seen has been the separation of families. Not only the separation of families, but where children are caged up in what are now we call concentration camps. But before they were called concentration camps, many of us have been doing this for a long time, have known them to be called hieleras in Spanish. And they're called hieleras because they're essentially cold boxes, ice boxes. And so they're so cold that children are getting sick in there and they're not being tended to. And we see this day and day after day. In fact, recently I had a conversation with a woman who was detained at the Border Patrol station down on Bayer Boulevard in between South San Diego and San Isidro. And what she told us, the group that she was talking to, was that she could hear every evening or early morning at 1 a.m. when they would bring the young men, some of them teenagers, some of them adults, young adults, and they would line them up. And then she would hear that they would get beaten by Border Patrol agents, and she would hear the yells and the cries. And so essentially what would happen is that Border Patrol agents would line people up, and these young men, some of them teenagers, were instructed to put their arms up against the railing or the fence or whatever it was, and some of them did not, and that's when Border Patrol would strike them. And so she also heard the comments that some of the Border Patrol agents would make, especially to young women, especially to pregnant women, where they would mimic some of the comments that the president made about there not being enough room for migrants here in this country. There's no more room. Go back from where you came. And so she would hear how Border Patrol agents would make the same comments to these young women who were pregnant. And every day that they were there, they were fed 3 times. At 1 p.m., I believe at 7 p.m., then again at 1 a.m. And what they were given were burritos that were half cooked. And so when you stick one of those burritos in the microwave and you don't cook it long enough, the inside part continues to be frozen. And that's the food that they were given. In addition to that, crackers, peanut butter crackers, and some boxed juices. And so some of the women with their children would request for more food, but they weren't given more food because that's all they had. And one woman chose to not want to get any more food. She said, "I'm not going to eat your food because it's terrible, it's disgusting. How can you call this food?" And so the Border Patrol agent that came in said, "Okay, as a form of punishment, if you don't want the food, then no one else is going to get the food. So you decide at this moment. You can do whatever the hell you want with your food. You can give it to your neighbor, but if you don't take it, then no one else is going to get fed tonight." And that was the attitude that this agent gave to this woman who decided to protest while she's inside this hielera, this concentration camp. The power there then was that the agents representing the U.S. government were imposing a form of collective punishment, almost torture, against these individuals who were fleeing their country because of all sorts of violence. In fact, agents would tell them, "You're not fleeing because of violence. We don't believe you. In fact, all you want to do is sell your body," but they use very terrible and descriptions about that, especially to the pregnant women. And so, what we have today, we can jump in a time machine and go back several decades. In fact, the modern era of border militarization and what we've seen, what we continue to see today, goes back to the late 70s when there was an increase of migration from the Central American countries that were dealing with civil strife because obviously U.S. interventionist policies. And so the migration then in the 70s and the 80s led the U.S. government to try to deal with migration in one way or another. And some of you might remember that in 1986, the IRCA, or what became known as the amnesty, was signed into law by then President Reagan. But it took a number of years before getting there, and a series of negotiations, one of which was the lessening of the Posse Comitatus Act that prevents the U.S. government or U.S. soldiers from being involved in domestic operations. And so because of that, the U.S. soldiers, specifically the Marines, were then doing drug interdiction programs along the border with Mexico. And in one incident, going back in May 20th of 1997, I believe, Ezequiel Hernandez, a young man, 18, 19 years old, in Redford, Texas, was caring for the family's sheep and goats, and he had his grandfather's old musket, and he was walking and didn't realize that there was a platoon of Marines that were following him. And they followed him, and they kept following him, and he heard some rustling in the background, and so he turned around and fired a shot into the air. And so the Marines took that as a threat, and they shot him and assassinated him, and they left his body hung over a well. And you can find that information, Ezequiel Hernandez, who was shot and killed. In fact, there was a documentary done about this, the Ballad of Ezequiel Hernandez, that tells the story of how border militarization has impacted communities to the extent that right now we have roughly around 8,000 soldiers that are beefing up the border along Texas. Not including, obviously, the National Guards that have been there for a while as well. And the collaborative nature of the Department of Homeland Security with the Department of Defense in strategy, in tactical communications, in equipment that includes military-scale equipment and the hollow point bullets that when fire explode upon impact. And so we see this time and time again. And though this has happened under both Republican and Democratic administrations, we can put a stop to that because, as someone referenced earlier, we are in a much more hyper sensitive or hyper conscious society about what's taking place around us, whether it's how climate change is impacting Central American countries, that it obligates people to have no other options but to migrate, or whether it's the civil strife that continues to occur there, or whether it was the hurricanes that impacted Haiti several years ago that created the exodus of Haitian migrants, first to South America and then coming all the way up through Central America to the U.S.-Mexico border, or whether it's, you name it, migration is something that's impacting our entire world. And here along the U.S.-Mexico border, we have to deal with it in a way that really resounds and brings forward a human rights perspective, because until now, all we've had have been war strategies to deal with migration. And so going back to that same time machine that I talked about, we go back to the Reagan era, it was the war on drugs. And we knew the Iran-Contra scandal that was taking place there, and the armed trafficking that was being done along the U.S.-Mexico border. If we go into the 1990s, the war on criminals, which was really a war on poor people. And so we saw under Clinton, for instance, the Welfare Reform Act in 1996 that allowed for the persecution of people who were trying to improve their lives with public benefits. And then suddenly we move forward, and 2001, with the attacks on September 11th, we suddenly have the war on terror under Bush's son. And then under President Obama, we had something else, which was the spillover violence. And so President Obama tried to do something different. He tried to push away this idea of the war on terror and tried to make it seem as though policies were different, but really they were many of them were the same. I had an opportunity to visit one of the Border Patrol stations in the Rio Grande Valley when President Obama was president, and the Ursula station were these large cages where migrants were being held there. Children were there. And so these cages that we see now under the Trump era were around during the Obama era. And so unless we're making conscientious decisions about who we're voting for, we're going to keep having the same policies. But that can't change unless you register to vote. And registering to vote is part of the panorama of political actions that you can take. It's not the only thing. It should be combined with other sorts of activities. Organizing in your community, talking to your co-workers. If you're an educator, talking to your students. If you're a student, talk to your fellow students. If you're at a workplace that's unionized or non-unionized, you can still activate them and say, hey, brother, sister, friend, let's register to vote. Let's make sure that we have, that we're counted in how we move together politically. And then let that not be the single action that you take politically to ensure that there is change in this country. Continue then to organize with your community, whether it's at the church or the mosque, or whether it's at the school or at the workplace, the corner street, or at the park when you're playing soccer with your friends, whatever it might be. There's an opportunity there to bring people forward. And so, to quickly close up my spot here, I think that there are some incredibly dangerous actions that this government has taken of late. Some of which I think will leave a mark beyond whatever administration might come in 2020. Some of which include the changing of the judges, for instance. The Supreme Court, I think, will have a tremendous say for generations to come. But we can continue to make that change and have an impact, especially if we are mentors to someone. And so registering to vote, ensuring then that you take the next step in voting, and then after that continuing to organize in your community so that it's a continuum of actions and activities that you are participating in is as important as breathing sometimes, because you want to breathe in clean air. You want to make sure that the folks that are your neighbors are being treated with dignity and respect. And I'm talking about the neighbors to our immediate south as well, because we're part of the larger community. So I appreciate that this brigade here brings together the regional perspective of San Diego, Tijuana.
So we just heard from Pedro Reyes reminding us that our actions, our consciousness, and our voice matters, not just to us as citizens or as Americans, and by Americans we mean, right, United Statesians, but rather our decisions, the things that we are speaking about, voting about, the things we are consuming, affects the entire world. This is a global, the impact of globalization means that anything we do impacts people all around the world. So it's very important for us to remember that when we vote on behalf of us and our voice, it doesn't just affect our neighborhoods and our census blocks and our districts. It really affects the entire world. So I have a quick story. I was at a rally. I wouldn't even call it a protest. I would call it a rally to bring awareness to what's happening in Hawaii and Mauna Kea. And this was in downtown Riverside, California. And as we're marching, we have Hawaiian flags, we have some banners, folks are chanting, and we see a person on a motorcycle, of the Harley Davidson kind of motorcycle. I hate to trade in stereotypes, but you can imagine what a Saturday morning, 11 a.m., Southern California, Harley Davidson, long beard bike rider might look like in terms of race and ethnicity. And as he's driving, he sees us marching, and he looks at us with brown skin, us with long, curly, and kinky hair, and he says, I don't even know what country that is, but this here is America. And we looked real perplexed, like, Hawaii is in the United States. and he's yelling at us, and he's already against us. Interesting. So at that moment, I already knew that I could feel the poem forming, and I'm going to share the poem that came out of it that evening. He got the camera on. Folks, don't tell anybody I've been writing new poems. Don't tell nobody. Don't tell nobody. I used to wonder how indigenous people were tricked into giving their land. I used to imagine a pilgrim or a planter or a soldier extending shiny things with one hand, holding muskets and hand cannons in the other. How much of the white skin did brown people see in the exchange? How much of the brown skin did white people touch to convince themselves of their superiority? I used to wonder why the word treaty sounded so similar to the words treason and traitor. I used to imagine settlers and colonies and territories existing in a time far, far and away, distant and ancient as history, as if occupation and the theft of indigenous land weren't happening today, as if bodies weren't being sold and traded as commodities today, as if migrating families weren't still leaving behind trails of tears, as if that phrase about not remembering the past and being doomed to repeat it was anything less than a cliche. Today, I don't know if history repeats like a breakbeat looping on an MPC, or if history builds like a Gershwin symphony mastering variations on a theme. It seems King Leopold's ghost has unfinished business on planet Earth. He likes the mountains in the Pacific Islands as much as the savannas in the Congo. He likes the views of outer space as much as the smell of natural labor. I wonder how many ivory tusks became telescopes in the 19th century. Apparently, liberty and sovereignty have become a delicate preface to economic imperialism. We like the idea of freedom until it impedes our culture of consumption. We like the idea of exploration until the things we find decide to speak for themselves. We love exotic in our summer travel, in our grocery aisle, in our dating apps, on the dance floor. We love ethnic as a demarcation of difference, as a check mark for diversity, as a reason I'm not racist. We love everything about culture except for the ways of life that aren't easily digested. This is not a poem about one mountain or one culture. This is not a poem about revolution or radical politics. This is not a poem of protest. This is a love poem about a people who can't even say each other's name, who will never see the land each other stands on, who will never know what it means to worship in each other's songs. This is a poem about a history of shared struggle, about a people who thread rebellion into the color of their skin, a people who hold the earth hollow, who know nature as a still breathing breath of the Creator, a people who will never hold hands in their lifetime, but hold each other's ancestors in their hearts when they share stories of resistance. This is not an anti-science poem. How else could you explain our wayfinders' mental map making through the Pacific, as if learning the horizon by the shape of the sunrise wasn't enough Copernicus, as if holding the stars bearing wasn't enough Galileo, as if reading the wave patterns of the ocean wasn't enough Jacques Cousteau, as if the constant observing, method testing, and systematic categorization wasn't enough ology for your bios. We need not ask your questions in our language. The questions you are seeking in the space between galaxies is the same answer we are seeking in the space between each grain of sand. This is a prayer poem. Remembering the first time I learned how impossible it is to worship within walls, how the ceiling seems to swallow my praise, how to touch God with my voice and nothing but the atmosphere in between. This is a wish poem. Remembering the first time I learned how impossible it is to dream without the night, how the lights guided our ancestors to freedom and new worlds, how to trace God's fingerprints by following the stars in the dark sky. This is an academic poem. Remembering the first time I learned how impossible it is to know without inquiry, how analysis is the substance of humanity, how to take as much care crafting a question as with the process of finding the answer. This is a happy poem. For the pieces of me still lost between space and time, between faith and knowledge, between passion and reason, between all that I feel and all that I know. This is a love poem for the place of 100,000 prayers holding our human onto this earth. Mauna Kea, I am still holding on to what is still human on this earth. This is a love poem. Next up to the stage, we just heard from an amazing poet, I like him if I say so myself, named Ant Black, speaking about what's going on in Montana. And we want to give it up for Dr. Peter Anderson, who is the president of the San Diego chapter of the Sierra Club, who is going to let us know why our voice matters when it comes to addressing issues of climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Dr. Peter Anderson. Make some noise.
It's great to be with you tonight. Voting is very important, but so are all other kinds of social and political action. So I'm going to leave a few Sierra Club cards, my business card with how to join Sierra Club. It's only $15 and hey, you get a free backpack with it. So not a bad deal. This is a global problem called climate change that really is incomparable to anything else we face. The estimates are 2 meters of sea rise, major increases in temperature, more storms than ever before, and we're already seeing this. We're already seeing this. 2 meters of sea rise, that's almost 7 feet of sea rise. Forget about Imperial Beach and Del Mar and Mission Beach and Ocean Beach, gone. And all those people displaced, but worse than that, the displacement of people of color and poor people in the third world will be incredible. Atolls in the Pacific gone, underwater. Bangladesh with tens of millions of people gone, completely underwater. We're already seeing massive storms. We used to have one hurricane of the magnitude we just saw hit Puerto Rico about every 20 to 50 years. Now we have one of those kind of storms hit New Orleans or Texas or Haiti or Puerto Rico once about every year or so. Visit the coast of New Jersey, basically gone. An amusement park out at sea that used to be on the coast, now it's a quarter mile off the coast. This is a result of large temperature-infused storms. So I'd like to read a poem. I downloaded a very brief one, but it points to the problem of climate change. It's by a poet who only has one name, Caroline, and the poem is titled Before. Before the world burned, cities vanished, water rose, and the air became too thick to breathe. It was a nice place, but to most, not nice enough to fight for. And I'll add, not nice enough to vote for. So it is very important. Your vote and the vote of your friends, very, very important. Sierra Club last year endorsed 48 environmental candidates here in San Diego County. We elected 42 of those candidates. We flipped city councils with the help of Labor and with the help of the Democratic Party and with the help of many other organizations. But Sierra Club is central because when people see that Sierra Club logo on the ballot, they know that's the seal of endorsement, that's the good housekeeping environmental seal for the best candidates. So we can influence tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of votes. And all over California, we got rid of Republican congressmen, climate deniers, and climate resistors, and replaced them with some very, very good candidates. But we still have a hell of a lot to do. This crisis is a huge one. If you can imagine, let me just frame it a couple of the kinds of problems. The Pentagon, the United States military, produced a report about 6 years ago on climate change. They said the #1 existential threat to the world and to the United States is not terrorism, it isn't Russia, it isn't China, it's climate change. It's climate change. Not only will the United States lose 9 bases that are located on coasts, but there will be hundreds of millions of climate refugees later on this century. Imagine, if you would, what a few refugees, and many of this from Central America are in fact climate refugees, too hot to live where they live, not enough employment, gang-infested neighborhoods, with them fleeing northward to safety with their families. Look at what that has done, how it's skewed our political system, and how it's caused suffering on the part of those people. Think about what happened in Syria, with a few million people moving out of Syria, drowning at sea, suffering, stored in concentration camps, and then disrupting the political structure of Europe as right-wing groups that want to resist these immigrants, discriminate against them and build barriers. Hungary and Austria not allowing any immigrants. And other countries, right-wing parties getting more votes because of these strange people that are inhabiting it. Now, multiply that when Bangladesh and cities in Central and South America and Southeast Asia, when you've got hundreds of millions of people on the move. And you can see the existential threat to all of the world's people. And all the world's people are at risk, but the people most at risk here in America and around the world are poor people. Because poor people never live on top of the mountain. They never live up in the highlands. They don't have views of the entire city. They live in the river bottoms and on the coastlines and in swamps and in poor areas. And those are going to be the first to be inundated by sea rise. So many things to be concerned about. But what do? The answer is we have to act internationally and nationally first. The first thing we got to do is we got to get rid of this moron of a president, a person of low IQ and low moral character that has unfortunately been put in power here in the United States. Not with a majority of the vote, by the way, but with this quirk of the Electoral College. We got to flip those states. We got to get rid of them. When you listen to that Democratic debate, when you listen to Kamala, and you listen to Elizabeth, and you listen to Beto and the other people, these are visionary people. These are smart people. These are people who believe in science. These are people that will turn this around. It's not that climate change won't continue to occur, but it's going to occur much more slowly if the right people get back in office. Now, we at Sierra Club have tried to backfill against the Trump disaster by electing state and local officials that abide by the International Paris Climate Accord. So we have 17 governors, and we have now 140 mayors that have all signed on and say, we're going to produce less carbon, we're going to follow the climate accord. So we've let the national government do its horrible thing, but we've backfilled to protect America from producing more and more greenhouse gas. So that's what we can do nationally. We can elect a new president, we can elect a better Congress, certainly flip the United States Senate. These are important things to do. And this is why your vote and your walk in precincts and your contributing money really, really matters. But then we can do things at even a more local level. The Sierra Club has several suits against the County Climate Action Plan. We've won 3 in a row in California Superior Court, in Appellate Court, and now a second time back in Superior Court. And the county's climate action plan does not go far enough. It reduced trips by automobile by 5% by 2030. That's nothing. That's nothing. We have to get off of oil almost entirely in the next 25 years. And all these communities I talked about in all these states have pledged to do that. That means no more gas guzzling engines. It means no more natural gas burning. This is what it's going to take, and it's doable. And it can create a whole new economy. More people work on building solar energy in just California than all the coal mining in the United States. There's not a choice between environment and jobs. The new economy is going to be environmental jobs, building windmills, building solar stations, building electric vehicles that can power America for the future without completely polluting the planet with toxic gas and air pollution. So there's many things we can do as individuals. We can try to drive less miles. We can bike to work once in a while. We can walk. We can take public transit. We can turn down the thermostat. I just replaced my old gas heater because my water heater because it was dying with an electric heater. And tomorrow, I'm going to testify before the San Diego City Council, who's adopting something called community choice energy. And that means we're not going to have to buy gas anymore, buy power anymore from or electricity from SDG&E. We can buy it from a number of clean energy companies. And the more we can electrify the country and then generate power with wind and solar and geothermal, we're going to get off of this addiction to petrochemicals and fossil fuels that is really on the verge of screwing up the planet in a big time. And it's not a future thing. We're already seeing it. Huge floods. I traveled through Missouri and Oklahoma last spring. It was a lake. There were no farmers' fields there. It was just a continuous lake because of the excess of rainfall. Big hurricanes hitting the coast of America and the Caribbean. Forest fires in California that come about because the climate's disrupted and we have prolonged droughts and increased heat. It was 114 in Redding, California this summer. That's crazy. They never had weather like that before. So what we can do individually, what we can do collectively is extremely important. And I ask you to join Sierra Club. I ask you to register to vote. I ask you to hunt out those environmental candidates that are going to make a big difference for the future of California, for the future of America, and for the future of the planet. Thank you so much.
All right, so next up we have coming to the stage, speaking on voter registration, doing some poetry, sharing some words about the importance of diversity and community. Make some noise for Brother Malcolm, everybody. Give it up, give it up, give it up.
We used to be so in tune with the Most High. Now we're all on dope bragging about who can get the Most High. Trying to float away from reality, and sometimes I wonder why. Then I remember, us black folks sure like to get fly. Fresh Nike flights make us feel like we can fly. Leaving church, the preacher makes us feel like we can fly. Till we meet that officer and get swatted like a fly. And the sight of such plight can make a grown man cry because one nation with liberty and justice for all is just a fictitious fantasy. Just last week there was another tragedy. A young mother's bundle of joy was beaten, battered in the street. They did not respect his brain in class. Now his brain matters in the street. And they say Black Lives Matter, but honestly, Black lives will never matter to them until they matter to you and me. And obviously, Black lives don't hold that much value. Because every day in the ghetto, young black men are popping one another like volumes. That makes it that much easier for an old white man to shoot a young black man for simply turning up his volume. Apparently, the young black man isn't the only one that likes to hear the sound of loud booms. But I'm tired of the scene that I keep seeing on the TV, so I switched my station from ABC to NBC, and what do I see? Newscaster saying soberly, this just in. Today at a crowded train station, there was a horrific tragedy. A suspected Islamic extremist detonated a bomb concealed in their bodily cavity. And although the Quran, Surah 4, Ayah 29 says, do not kill yourself, people still commit suicide casually. And when the media says the perpetrator was a Muslim, people go attacking Sikhs. Well, that shows just how ignorant we are as a people. And I never understood how a person can witness a toddler get raped before their little innocent body gets dumped in a lake and still claim there's no such thing as evil. Well, they say the greatest trick the devil ever played on mankind was making him believe that he does not exist. Well, I say the greatest trick ever played on Africans was making them believe that slavery was actually abolished, because we're still slaves. Slaves to these dead-end 9-to-5s. Slaves to welfare and SSI. Slaves to prescription drugs and wine. Slaves to fast food and swine. Slaves to the prison industrial complex. Slaves to a media laced with propaganda and illicit sex. We used to be so in tune with the Most High. Now we watch reality shows, arguing about which girl kissed the most guys. And if we ever want to put an end to our youth's delinquency, we need to tune our antennas back to a divine frequency. And I know it seems like the good old days are long gone. The best advice I can offer you, my brothers and sisters, fear Allah and read the Holy Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. Do you know what that means? Listen up, world, open up your earlobes. I'ma do this one for all of the Islamophobes, all the white supremacists that wanna be Trump, trying to chop my whole religion down like a tree stump. But our numbers keep climbing, and that got them shook. They say they're Christians, but say I'm wrong for living by the book. I'm not a punchline rapper, life is serious. Every day I wake up praying for the kids in Syria, Yemen and Somalia, Afghanistan and Pakistan. They purchasing them bombs off of them taxes that you hand to Sam. And that man is not my uncle. I'm trying to find a way to make Sam say uncle. My people were humiliated, kidnapped and humbled. For 400 years we've been trapped in this jungle. But before we ask for reparations, we gotta free all of our people stuck on the plantation, mass incarcerated in these stationary slave ships. And my people still hustling for chains and a whip. Now, ain't that a trip? Put it in the news. Our women leaving cause they got our men confused. Police want to bully me, but what I them want do? I call up bullies bluff like I'm Kim Jong-un, yeah. I'm just a lyricist showing them what the business is, waking them from their ignorance during their prison sentences. Young, black, and gifted and sharp as nuclear physicists, but they gotta see literate, and I think it's deliberate. Rapping religious like one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but the pamphlets I printed are full of African images. I'm getting sick of this is getting ridiculous. At a black man, you empty clips from the police, you quickly spread. I be feeling like killing them, pilling them like a banana, cause they never drilling them. All the blood that is spilling, I'm drilling them like a diamond, cause the doctor ain't healing them. I'm a gentleman, but I'm still in the pit, watching for snakes, venom, and adrenaline, trying to be intimate, but I'm not indifferent. I don't offend them, I shake them like cinnamon, mind don't mention it. I do not want you to remember me, I want you to remember he who allows you to breathe. I want you to look back and remember the history. Whatever we don't remember, we are bound to repeat. Remember Lot who told his people not to sin. They did not listen, kept on sinning, then a storm was sent. America is in a similar predicament, with women acting masculine, women are feminine. Plus 99% of people in the government will gladly sell their soul to be part of the 1%. The candidate whom you elect is quite irrelevant, cause those who pull the puppet strings select the president. I'm just a harbinger, steady building like carpenter, studying like a college nerd, reading books like an auditor. Studied the art of war in the hood, I'm a monitor with a pair of binoculars, watching murderous officers. You put it on the turf that you put in a lot of work, and that you did a lot of dirt, but it just left your mama hurt. You might think I'm berserk, but it's obvious I'm alert. That is why I dropped out of church, cause they don't teach you how to search. That's the reason I'm leaving this evening and going to be with the people and heathens who believe what they're teaching and preaching and do it all year and not only a season. To the reason they throw a disease and not want to feed them, but take all the season and leave them looking for help overseas. And the question is, when you die, where did you leave them? Did you try to relieve them, or did you blindly follow one set of leaders, or fighting your demons and get some good deeds? Because hell as well, I don't care what you believe in.
Yeah.
Start fighting your demons and get some good deeds, because hell is real, I don't care what you believe in.
Wow.
And before I end the set, I just want to say too, this is a PSA of some sorts. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, there's going to be a big press conference downtown at the City Hall. It's concerning the smart streetlights that are being put up in our city right now. It was unaware to most San Diegans that there already were 4,000 smart streetlights installed, about 4,200 throughout the city. They just approved 4,000 more, which would be 8,000 cameras, because each smart light has 2 cameras with about a 360 view. It has audio, it has video, it has shot tracker, it collects data, it collects environmental information. However, the only people that have complete access to the data is the police department. And about 80% of the cameras are being put in Southeast San Diego, between about Spring Valley and Logan Heights. And it does include North Park and all these areas around here. They're spying on us, and they're using this data to incriminate and put more people in cages. There's also a big swath of cameras in Imperial Beach. So the call tomorrow is to say, before you install these 4,000 cameras, bring the community to the table and let us at least say our opinion about what we think. Now, some people might want to be monitored and spied on. but I don't.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, the San Diego Tijuana Revolutionary Poets Brigade is proud to be at Queen Bee's Arts and Cultural Center. And the most beautiful thing about this space, when we talk about what San Diego means in terms of diversity, in terms of arts, in terms of pushing the movement forward for anybody who wants to express themselves, Queen Bee's is an amazing place, and we are so fortunate to have the owner, the founder. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Alma to tell us about Queen Bee's and why this space is so important. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me to the stage, as it's the only opportunity I get to be here and get taller and taller. Queen Bee's is being here, and we're proud to celebrate this year our 10-year anniversary. So I'm really proud of that, and that wouldn't happen without this beautiful community of poets, artists, singers, dancers, you name it. You know, we have a very, very vibrant community, and I'm just proud to be here this long in San Diego promoting our work. So it's a collective group of brilliant people out there in the community. So thank you for discover Queen Bee's and make it part of your week, daily life.
Tell me what's happening in November.
November, December. Well, we have a National Poetry Week next week. I think everybody knows that. Rudy Francisco is kind of the lead to that. So we also have our 10-year anniversary with a group of shows that we're going to do, represent 10 years on the community. So every day is going to take a place representing each part of the community. For example, salsa, poetry, music, dance, modern dance, kids fashion show, you name it. So we're going to have a full schedule of events from the 1st to the 12th, which is the 12th is our grand anniversary, and it's going to be a free event for the community to come together. So that's, you can check us at queenbeesSD.com and all our social media as well. So I hope to see all these beautiful faces here throughout the years. And yeah, welcome to Queen Bee's. This is a place to explore and to make it yours. Thank you.
All right, next up to the stage, you've been hearing him playing the hip hop, playing the salsa, playing the reggae, playing all of the music for the San Diego Tijuana Revolutionary Poets Brigade. But now you're going to get to hear from none other than DJ Gil, show2. Ladies and gentlemen, talk about it, Gil.
Thank all four of you. I appreciate it. I wasn't expecting to spit tonight, but I have a poem I have to practice anyway, and it kind of fits with what's going on. It's some new-ish, and it's interesting because the gentleman here, he's not here anymore. He was talking about people who were refugees because of climate change, and I was doing some research on a poem that I was doing based off of the 90s. This Saturday we're having a big event talking about using poets, dancers, singers, comedians, talking about the breakthroughs that happened in the 90s that we still either enjoy today or that are still a detriment to us today. So I needed to do some research about the 90s, and you know, I lived through the 90s. The 90s was my heyday, so there wasn't that many surprises, and then something hit me in my research, and I only found it on a few different places. It wasn't really that popular on any of the timelines, and so I wrote this poem about this. So here we go. Lately, while I'm diligently handling my business on the toilet, that's a great way to start a poem, right? I know, thank me later. All right, here we go. Lately, while I'm diligently handling my business on the toilet, my 1-year-old daughter manages to slowly push the door open and waddles in. Gianna and her pacifier make her way across the cold tile, and without a word, she lays her tiny head against my thigh. Simultaneously, I have strong feelings of this really needs to stop. I mean, I'm pooping here. And I really want these moments to never end. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how I feel about the 90s. See, I first fell in love with her music. Notorious Big, Redman, Lauryn Hill, Snoop and Dre, Nirvana, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Boyz II Men, Belle Biv DeVoe, and anything Teddy Riley. Yep, you get my gist. Then I fell in love with her dances. The Kid and Play, The Vogue, The Running Man, Electric Slide, Tootsie Roll, The Butterfly, you get my gist. I fell in love with her clothes, baggy, colorful, sometimes worn backwards, sometimes with the tag still hanging on, sometimes airbrushed with your boo, or the dead, or your crew, you get my gist. We were hip-hop and grunge. We were sweaty and loud. And the worst thing we had to worry about was our president was catching him with his pants down. See, our breakthrough was our originality, the ability to respect someone's abundant differences. I never wanted these moments to end, but then, stop. 1991, the Gulf War begins. Stop. 1991, the poster children for police brutality gets away with beating Rodney King on the freeway, and it's caught on tape, and LA responds by showing the city how much it hurt. Stop. 95, OJ and the OKC bombings are the only thing on people's minds, but in the meantime, 750 people die in a heat wave in Southside Chicago. The block was hot and looked like death, but no one paid attention to the humidity dripping from their breath because the majority of victims were old, black, and broke. 750. That is 3 times more than the deaths of Columbine, the OJ murders, OKC, and the 93 World Trade Center bombings combined. You know, the stuff that actually made the headlines. No death is worse than another, but goddamn, 750 Americans die in the state that I was born in, and I don't hear a thing about it. Doesn't make most 90s US history timelines. Old, black, and broke. Just one of those things will get you ignored in America, 90s or now. 2, and I wouldn't want to be you. If you are guilty of all 3, well, if I'm being honest, that will someday soon be me. And my heart breaks, and my pulse quickens, because I wasn't even able to give them their moment of silence, their proper prayer. Every year it grows hotter in California when I am living in the dusk of my life, when I can no longer entertain, no longer work or teach. Will we go back to 90s thinking? Will my country see my value? Will I be worth decent AC for a week? Big question. When I can no longer carry monetary value, who will truly care for me? I know some of you, black or not, might be wondering the same thing. So yes, Gianna, baby girl, come rest your tiny head on my thigh while I'm pooping. I will treasure and hold tightly to all of those sweet and stinky moments that you needed me. And I'd appreciate it when the reverse is true, that you never, ever let me go. Thank you.
There you go. All right, next up, we have none other than, I don't even know your title anymore. Such a regal, prestigious associate director, quasi-emperorship.
This is payback, y'all.
This is payback. I got that mark out. I get to introduce you now, fam. This is my brother, and when we started poetry, I can tell you the thing that we wanted to do with poetry was to change lives, and we were fortunate to start with a crew called Collective Purpose, and each of the members that got along, we all kind of were coming from a different angle, and I know I wanted to use poetry to teach people, and this next person wanted to use poetry to get people involved and to change, and as we sort of went through the collective and came on the other side, we're seeing each other realize their dreams. So this is the Assistant Executive Director of Alliance San Diego. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Wilson.
Yeah, that's payback. That's how payback goes. Because he don't ever get to introduce me. I always introduce him. And I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate y'all being here tonight. And I appreciate Jim for setting this up. I always said that way back when we first started Collective Purpose, one thing I told everybody was, we're not going to measure our success on how many people show up. we're going to measure our success and the experience we give the people who arrive and make sure they leave happy. And so, Jim, tonight is successful no matter what, because you had a bunch of truth up here on the stage, and truth can never be denied a success, right? So hold your head high, and next time you do this, we're going to be here with you then too, okay?
October 10th.
October 10th, we here. We in the building already, it's done. So Jim asked me to come in and register folks to vote, because that's kind of in my wheelhouse of expertise right now. And then he also asked my wife to come and spit a poem, and so we got 2 small kids, so he can't have both of us, and he didn't specify which one he wanted more, so she kind of said, well, why don't you go? And I do what I'm told, so I'm here. And so he asked me to speak a little bit about voting. I want to start where Brother Malcolm ended, about the street lights. Everything he said is true and bad at the same time. True and bad, and it is worse. It's worse because before getting these street lights, the city of San Diego did not put a policy into place governing the use of the data that's collected by these street lights. Let me say that again. 16,000 street lights in total will be installed, all having 2 cameras each and 2 microphones each with shot spotter technology. And there is no policy in the city of San Diego's government for how the data collected will be used and or shared. They said yes to the cameras because they're free. The manufacturer offered to give the cameras to the city for free if the city gave the manufacturer access to the data. So that is the only policy that is in place. So after we complained back in 2017 when they first, got these, when they approved them in 2016, we found out about it in 2017, we complained, guess what they said? When they start being installed, we'll write the policy. 6 months ago, we complained again. Guess what they said? The police department is writing the policy. So the fox is truly in the fucking hen house when the department that's going to use the data to destroy us writes the policy on how the data gets used. Instead of the people we fucking elected through our vote exercising their due power to create the policy to guide and govern the police department. That's the power of the vote. We voted for people to make policy in our best interest, in line with our values, morals, and principles. And they have betrayed us yet again. The power of the vote is that in 2013 we had a special election for mayor because Bob Filner got ousted for his headlock maneuvers. We had a Latino man who was progressive running against the white establishment candidate, Kevin Faulkner. The Latino man was also running against the white establishment candidate, Nathan Fletcher. He made it through the primary against Kevin Faulkner, and we didn't turn out to vote in the general election. When I say we, I don't mean black people, I don't mean Latinos. I mean white progressives. The blacks and Latinos showed up, the white folks didn't. Kevin Faulkner wins. We get cameras that fucking record our every coming and going, and we don't get to say how the data gets used. That's the power of the vote. Our vote can put the people who respect us, the people who look like us, the people who will govern like us in power to make policies that impact our daily lives. Fuck who's president. Excuse my language. Fuck who's president. He can say everything he wants. He can tweet whatever he wants. More policy made locally impacts us than anything the president does in Washington, D.C. Build a wall, we can tear it down. Build a wall, we can sue to deny him the funds. Build a wall, we can make sure that whatever company gets a contract doesn't get a contract with the city, county, or any other government body in California. Build a wall, we can pass a law to close detention facilities. See, we have power to counter whatever he does in D.C. locally, but only if we vote and elect people who look, think, live, breathe, act, and react the way we do. That's the power of our vote. And we are sitting on our asses complaining about what's happening in D.C. And meanwhile, right here at home, the things that will harm us the most are being swept under the carpet. Or we're allowing the people who intend to harm us to write the policy. The police have no interest in protecting me. They have no interest in protecting Brother Malcolm. They have no interest in protecting you. Their interest is in furthering the agenda of the establishment downtown, which serves business and rich people. And if we don't vote on March 3rd, because the election is in March this year, y'all, the primary is in March. They have moved it, and they haven't told anybody yet. If we don't vote on March 3rd to make a change, then we can't complain in November, when that change doesn't come.
The ballots have to be in, the registration ballot, voter registration has to be in February 12th.
It has to be in 2 weeks, 15 days before Election Day. You have to register to vote in the next election 15 days before Election Day. So if you know people, register them to vote. In 2016, my organization registered 3,000 young folks to vote. We went to colleges all across the county, and we went in classrooms with professors' permission, and we registered people to vote in the classroom, and we ended up registering 3,000 people to vote. Since 2009, we've been doing voter engagement, voter outreach, voter registration, and we have 110,000 voters in our database right now in the city of San Diego, 125,000 in the county, of voters we can mobilize to support issues, policies, initiatives that are going to change our community. But it does not matter, any of the work we do does not matter if people don't vote. Voting isn't the only way to make change, it's one way. Voting is a tool. Voting isn't the change, it is the tool for change. But if we sit down and we don't vote, then we can't complain when the outcome happens. We can't turn things around after the election is done. We can enact all the laws we want in California. That might help us, but it's not helping nobody in Alabama. It's not helping nobody in Mississippi. It's not helping nobody in Louisiana. We have a lot that we can do at the ballot box, but we got to show up. So please, tell everybody you know, this election is for our lives. And people have died based on who's in office, locally, at the state level, and in the national government. I tell this story all the time. When Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor, in order to balance the state budget, one of the things he did was cancel all state funding for battered women's shelters. Overnight, the battered women's shelters across the state lost their state funding. Women who had nowhere else to go were forced to stay in harmful situations. We know that that killed some people. We know that that changed some children's lives. We know that that put some people in situations that they had no remedy for. We can't allow things like that to happen again. If we give 4 more years to the right, if we give 4 more years to the folks who don't look out for us, then they'll be coming for us next. And it's a short step to my doorstep from the door next to mine. So we got to do everything we can to protect ourselves and our neighbors, and voting is one way to do that. So please talk to everybody you know, get them to go out and vote on March 3rd. If they're not registered, get them a voter registration form. If they don't know how to register, they can go online, they can go to DMV. There are many ways to register to vote. And I'm going to end on this. We talk about voter suppression and how that happens everywhere else. We need to be focused on what's happening here in San Diego. We have a registrar of voters. I'm going to tell you 3 things about him. He was a registrar in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, 2004. Look it up. He was a registrar in San Diego in 2016, where there were 3 polling locations and police stations and 2 polling locations and funeral homes in the Latino neighborhood. Check it out. In 2018, he canceled the police stations, but he kept the funeral homes. That's voter suppression, y'all. When you put polling locations in places that you know are culturally insensitive, you're doing it to keep people from turning out to vote. Even after being told, he did it anyway. We need to make sure we change the county government so we can change our registrar to somebody who's going to promote voting in the communities where voting is not a value, where voting doesn't happen, and where it needs to happen so we can make change in the world. Thank you very much, Jim, for this platform. I appreciate all you for coming out tonight, and I hope the next poet blows up the stage.
Next up, we got one of the legends of the San Diego poetry scene, and I really don't get enough opportunities to say how much this poet has inspired me for decades, showing me what it means to write, showing me what it means to perform, and showing me what it means to be creative, and most importantly, showing why it's important to be yourself and why your voice matters. So as we talk about your voice matter in voting, we want to talk about your voice mattering in the arts. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the legend, Mr. Chris Lanoy.
I breathe my body electric. I breathe my body electric where cities hum with scattered light from a million curtained windows as half the globe passes from day to night. Our times are filled with inconsistencies. They are miniaturized. Our vital components have become interchangeable. Space is cluttered with debris. Communication is globally instant. Cell phones ring at inappropriate times. Emails will leave us with no lasting marks for the anthropologist to decipher. I am crossing the millennium already encased in my time. At the beginning of the atomic age, I have grown nuclear. My future is now. I bow beneath the weight of technology. It drags me behind the spinning polymer wheel constructed of silicone and internet connections as a new past hurries by me with alien signs of change. I am crossing the millennium. I feel obsolete. I cannot stop its progress. It grinds me between dollars. I can only move forward covered in sports hype and the latest designer clothes. Time compresses me into smaller and smaller bites, gobbles me up in corporate mergers that plow the field under for the bottom line. They will feed me genetically altered food as they slowly starve the third world. The United Nations struggle with selective strikes as refugees live in squalid camps. They wonder if there will be a home to go home to. I see the brutality of the ethnically cleansed, mass voices broken in a chasm of futility. It leads my soul to slaughter, and I cannot wash the spot of blood from my hand. I have pressed the off button on the remote, but I cannot keep this dream of killing from my ears. The line of my arrival stretches from the middle of the last century, travels the beginning of rock and roll, walks the jungles of Vietnam. Born at the birth of the first transistor, the world has grown smaller around me, reduced to nanoseconds, measured in milliamps. Reproduction of species has moved to the laboratory. They sit on the teetering one-legged stool that my grandfather used to milk his cow. I sell my spirit to the highest bidder, unlock my genetic code for the insurance company to find the day I will die. Map all there is to know about me for the government, still the ageless questions worry me. Why am I here? I breathe my body electric and it groans. I sigh digitally, look through shaded plastic, cover my ears with foam sound. I have been seatbelted in climate-controlled comfort, encased in steel that has been welded with robotic arms. My fingers have reached into the outerness of space. I listen with a vast array of parabolic ears to the twitching of galaxies that no longer exist. I gaze light years towards the Big Bang, smash atoms into quarks and protons, pick skeletons from the cold bottoms of oceans. I am crossing the millennium of jihad, of second coming, of hopeless intervention, carving my legacy into the flesh of the unborn. Here will be the end of my life in this century that opens before me. Stray bullets exploding from the muzzle of some young punk's gun as he discharges a reality that spits fear at his enemies, softly folding him into sidewalks and streets and yellow ribbons that say, "Do not cross." Stray bullets only go one way, carry no apologies, feel no remorse, know only the law, ballistic, stop when they can go no further. They don't sound like death. More like the 4th of July. The baby just stopped crying, that's all. That's all. Stray bullets. My father lives on the nightly news. He digests the evening paper with the voraciousness of 3 newly hatched caterpillars. Leaves nothing but the spine, which he recycles by packing it around his gun collection. He sits on his Middle America and watches the jobs go to Mexico, herded by NAFTA cowboys with their smiles, as endless flows of Latin Americans spill over the fence, furrow his lawn of manufactured grass in their slow passage north. He dreams Republican, and every day his world gets browner and more ethnic. Thank you.
Chris Lanoy. So far, you might be looking around like this seems like it's a boys' club tonight. The San Diego Revolutionary Poets Brigade, San Diego Tijuana Revolutionary Poets Brigade is not a boys' club. In fact, in November, we are going to have an all-women's event, so we will be represented. So do not worry about the San Diego Tijuana Revolutionary Poets Brigade. And in fact, our next speaker, we are not bringing her out to close the night as a speaker of women's rights and issues and why it's important for us to respect and encourage women to vote, especially in the upcoming years. But rather, I appreciate when women speak as the last voice because that's the one that stays with us and that's the one that resonates with us the longest. So I think of it as an honor and respect to always have the last voice be the most important voice in some cases. So, without further ado, you know what? This new hair, this is my first time getting to introduce you ever. I can say so many wonderful things, except for the fact that I appreciate the years of mentorship through action. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Professor Maria Figueroa.
Our relations. My name is Maria Figueroa, and I'm very honored to be here tonight. And I'm going to keep my comments short because it's evening, and I'm on the 3rd shift or the 4th shift. And if we know anything about work and labor, as our brother over here was saying, you know, you got to split the labor. And so my partner is home with my children, but I've been at it since like 5 o'clock this morning. I wanted to thank my brother Jim for inviting me tonight, and yes, to echo Ant's ideas about or comment about the last word. It's also the first voice we hear, and I think that's really important for us to acknowledge our original, our place and our root from which we come. We all come from a woman, and I think that in closing we also honor the beginning. I'd like to just say a few words. You know, Jim asked me to speak on misogyny, and those are big things, you know, and I can't say that I'm an expert on misogyny because I don't consider myself a misogynist, and I hope that none of us here, but I am an expert on what it means to experience it in the face, or being a woman, a self-identified woman too, in this era, and in this historical moment. And I think there are some basic tenets to what I want to share, which is that we are experiencing what we're experiencing as a society because we have lost sight, I think, of our grounding, and we've lost sight of where we begin. And really, if we go back to understanding that societies, indigenous societies and traditional societies really lived with the understanding of a harmonious way of life, then we would not be involved in this hierarchical, patriarchal, kind of sexist way of existing that disenfranchises not only women but also men and harms children. And so as a mother, you know, of 2 children, for me it's very important to raise my children understanding that there should be balance and equality, but not in this only gendered manner, but that there needs to be balance and equality among humanity. And that's why I like to begin by saying all my relations, because it's from the inanimate to the existing, the two-legged. And so I come to you today in that way, and in that way honoring also my foremothers, honoring my grandmother on my maternal side, and my grandmother on my paternal side, and my mother as well, who continues to be, you know, a role model of what we're doing. There are many issues, you know, facing us today, challenging us. And I think if we understand that when we empower women, when we empower girls, when we empower our sexually minoritized brothers and sisters as well, that we create a more just society. And it is from that perspective that I also think that we need to come to, let's say, voting for the rights and the good of our society. Because again, we know that if we do right for women, we do right for men and for children. I want to just read and share a couple of things here. I just finished this great memoir by the prolific Ana Castillo. And she wrote a memoir called Black Dove, Mama, Mijo, and Me, where she talks about being a queer mother of color as a single mother, mothering and raising a young man of color in Chicago. And it struck me when she said something very poignant. And I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs here, and then I'll close with one of my pieces. Because I'm also a poet, I guess you could say. I'm also a writer. I don't come out as a writer often in public because I'm busy, you know, and it's 9 o'clock and I'm older and I should be home asleep. But and on a Monday night, oh my goodness. So thank you for getting me out of here. But to quote the prolific Castillo, she says, "All parents, not just in the United States, but everywhere, worry that their sons and daughters may not be viewed in public with the humanity with which they are loved and regarded at home. But I've come to be especially sensitive and concerned how males of color in particular are viewed. Mothers have always been accorded much of the credit or blame for making men. Single mothers are held to a special standard since they have, quote, failed to have a positive male role model in the home. Whether single or married in a same-sex household, or if a mother is completely absent, no matter how well he is looked after, a boy learns from the world. He examines society, he consorts with other males growing up. He learns as much of what it is to be a man outside the home and inside it," end of quote. And so, you know, I wanted to share that because, again, from my position and thinking about misogyny, thinking about patriarchy, thinking about sexism, I begin from the place of what do I want to teach my boy child? What do I want to teach my girl child as well? And that for me is an important lesson, and it's an important way to walk in this world. So let me just close with a piece that I wrote for the California Latinas for Reproductive Justice. Had an event, a storytelling event down in San Isidro at the front. And they invited me to be one of the storytellers. And so this is a piece, and I think it encompasses many of the intersecting issues and intersecting identities that attempt to challenge, not attempt, but that do challenge these ideas of patriarchy and of misogyny. Justicia. Justice exists in between the childhood mental space when it is revealed you are expected to be a mother, and between the abusive moment your partner tells you, pues querías hijos, you wanted children. Justicia exists in between the moment 2 midwives and 3 delivery nurses assist my journeying child and his warrior mother through the liminal space of excruciating pain, fear, and relief. Birthing through shoulder dystocia was no initial battle, or was our initial battle. Justice exists in between the, quote, morning after pill when your lover and hormonal endorphins cloud your academic intelligence because doing it any other way doesn't always feel so good. Justice exists in between when responsible 13-year-old Mexicana teenager chases El Paletero down Hesperian Street summer afternoons with toddler brother in hand and infant sister on the hip. Justice exists in between moments your mother crosses la frontera falsa, con papeles chuecos, Indian hair cut short porque en el norte, in the north, there are no Indian girls y las muchachas con pelo largo. Justicia exists in between El Rio that took my great-grandmother Emilia one rainy afternoon in Tuxcacuesco, Jalisco. Emilia was a free spirit who didn't submit to conventional womanly ways. Justice exists in between 1975 and 1985. 10 years postpartum for mi mami, a working-class immigrant woman who accessed birth control while my dad accessed the bottle, drinking some of his pains away. Justice was my mom's ability to take charge. In 1985, my first sibling was born. Justice exists in between when I kiss my chiquita linda after a bendición and encourage her to say her prayers. Justicia exists in between holding baby Adrian in English 100 as I lecture on syntax, narrative structure, and conclusions, while Mommy Jasmine takes notes and discusses with her peers. La educación más alta is embodied in baby Adrian. Justicia exists in between my niece Jasmine, baby girl born to teen father who hadn't prepared for transporting infant girl child from hospital to home. A Target store run for a baby carrier turned car seat is just. Justice exists in between my indigenous grandmother, Josefina, giving birth to a stillborn child, Jesus. His 6 siblings were encouraged by la partera, by the midwife, to say their goodbyes to him. Justice exists in between cosmos of night and day, with the 4 directions of the sacred elements, between rebosos and estrellas. All my relations, thank you. Good evening.
I can't live my life this way. Continually get high instead of running around like one bird down. It's a new day, gotta do it big.
Alright. So,
can't live that way. You hold my check, can't live that way.
to close this thing on out, ladies and gentlemen, the person who orchestrated this evening's events, one of the glue to the San Diego and Tijuana Revolutionary Poets Brigade. I mean, this guy's been going back and forth between San Diego, teaching all over the county in various regions in the northern part of Mexico. So we want to give it up big.
Poets, our DJ, our host, much love to all of you. Thank you for coming in. I want to also do a shout out for Alfred Williams, who's going to be taking this and putting on YouTube for us. And so we had an interesting turnout tonight, and hopefully we'll attract more voters. Remember, I said February 12th, it's February 17th to get these voter registration forms in. So I'm going to ask the beat poet of the United States and of San Diego to join me right now, and we're going to close with a collage poem. One of the things that you need to understand about why it says on the banner, it says the San Diego Tijuana Revolutionary Poets Brigade, is I went to Chris and Joe and Sharon and Lori and I said, I think we should be bilingual and binational. Look what our unpresidential president is doing. And we can strengthen our borders with friendship and not with militarization. And none of them hesitated a second. So now we have Pilar, we have Jarado, and we have Mavi down in Tijuana, and they're doing exactly what we're doing. And we have poetry readings in Clave Caracol and at Secut and Tijuana, and we have readings at the Space Bar in La Mesa. And we go back and forth, we cross and go back and forth because we believe our Mexican brothers and sisters are a tribute and they are valuable to the culture of the United States. If we have St. Patrick's Day, we have what's the thing in October? Oktoberfest? I'm tired too. Why can't we have Cinco de Mayo? It's part of American culture as well, and celebrate the people from all the cultures. We are not a melting pot, we are a mosaic. And if you put all the cultures in a melting pot, then it's kind of a goop. And if you say we're a mosaic, like we have here tonight, that's my America. And you are my America. Chris is going to start us off.
There is ample light after an atomic explosion to read the obituaries of many generations.
And don't forget about the revolution inside. The inside revolution inside you. Your rebellion against violence. Against you being violent against you. The revelation of you feeling unequal with you. The revolution inside of you. The revolution against the need you have to stop bottling up your dislike for you. To stop harboring your hate for you. The importance of you to stop fighting you, as so you begin to unleash words and songs and symbols and dances and tears of peace and dignity and equality and love and love and love for you.
We are a country of contrary means of arrival. We are a country of slave labor imported and assimilated. Stripped of ethnic identities and assimilated, crossbred, American pie fed and assimilated, crossing cultures as we cross the oceans in bellies of ships, forced to the resolution of whips and chains.
Open your heart to your black angels of peace. Open your heart to your red angels of love. Open you to the revolution in you and your brown angels of equality. Open your eyes to your yellow angels of circling dragons, blessings, circling hands, joined in diversity's power of love. Open your heart to your white angels of forgiveness and tolerance for you. That corporate media has tricked you out of with lies, with misspeaks, and half-truths and twisted truths, and hypnotized you to hate you when the angels remind you, you were born to love you.
We were drawn to neighborhoods for the same color of skin, the same shape of eyes makes us pool our resources, to preserve our heritage, to make us feel better, to be the same, not alien, not alone.
Corporate media, radio, TV, news, that's not news. Spin, that's poppycock propaganda for the rich. Magazines, movies, news spikers, colonizing your mind, mesmerizing you, marginalizing you, disenfranchising you away from your own true you, away from your true man, woman, child.
And still the flesh is imported. And still the almond eyes grow rounder as the generations pass. And still the dark eyes turn lighter as the generations pass. And still the round eyes turn oval as the generations pass. And still the white skin turns darker as the generations pass. And the sun burns us all. And the sun burns us all.
Revolution inside. Don't forget the revolution inside of you. Don't forget about the coming home. It's time for you to come home. Come home to love. Don't you forget to come home to love. Decolonize your mind. Decolonize your heart. Open your heart to you. Don't forget to come home. Don't forget to love. To love. To love. To love you. Love is coming. Love is coming home to the revolution inside. The revolution inside you. Thank you for coming. That's it.